You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about that hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the third Doctor story, The Time Monster. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Let's do the Time Monster again.
So, folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, at the StarQuest YouTube channel where you can see us in video, or and you should also hit the bell to get notifications. So check us out in all those places. Follow us. Make sure to subscribe. We would love to have you as a regular listener. Also, be sure to check out another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy called The Catholics of Oz. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/OZ. And it's about Australia, not the wizard. So let's talk about the Time Monster. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
I'm disappointed we didn't get to see androids fighting. Okay, so this week, the third Doctor and Joe Grant encounter the Master. He's pretending to be a scientist named Dr. Thaskalos, which is allegedly the Greek word for master, and he's doing experiments with time to summon a chronovore, or time-eating beast, named Kronos. The beast was once thought to bring good times to the ancient civilization of Atlantis, but these times also brought problems, and the Atlanteans turned against him. Meanwhile, back in Atlantis, the 500-year-old King Dalios is against the return of Kronos because he saw that the good times weren't so good. But his younger, foolish subjects want Kronos and the good times to come back. The king's queen, Galea, forms an alliance with the Master to bring back Kronos, but in a timey-wimey way, the Doctor and the Master end up outside of time. There, Queen Galea reveals that she is actually Kronos. She allows the Doctor and Joe to go back to their own time in the 20th century, and the Master escapes and vanishes into history.
That's okay. I definitely missed something when I watched this because I did not catch that Galea was Kronos.
Well, that's what I got out of it. Maybe I was watching it late at night. Maybe I was mistaken.
Okay.
Because it was a different actress that played the Kronos on the green screen.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And her face is huge and blocked by other things, and she's got weird makeup on. I thought it was Galea.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. I was like, for a second there, I was a little scared. Did I watch the wrong thing?
Yeah.
No, I watched it. Okay, good. So we can talk about that as we get to it. But Atlantis. So this is the now third time we've had an explanation for what happened to it, the ancient civilization of Atlantis, right? First was Underwater Menace, the second Doctor. The second would have been the Daemons, the third Doctor. And
there may be a reference to it being sunk there, I guess. Yeah, briefly. This is the first time we've seen Atlantis in its prime.
Yes, that's true.
Like in the Underwater Menace, we see people descended from Atlanteans, but we don't see Atlantis.
Okay. I was trying to the TARDIS Wiki was talking about that, and I was trying to find the reference into Daemons, and because it wouldn't have been a big part of that episode, but maybe it came up.
No, I think the head daemon alludes to having been in Atlantis when it sank or something.
Okay,
if memory serves.
So this also marks the second to last appearance of Roger Delgado as the Master. He's got one more that he's going to do, and
he was planned to have another one. The plan was to have like the kind of the series, the John Pertwee series finale was going to be a battle between the Doctor and the Master, and the Master was going to die but save the Doctor and redeem himself, if I recall correctly. But Roger Delgado unfortunately died in a car accident before that happened.
Okay. So, and we won't see the Master again until the Fourth Doctor?
Fourth Doctor.
Okay.
We'll see two, sort of two versions of the Master with the Fourth Doctor. Both of them are horribly burned. and they're both meant to be just the continuation of Roger Delgado's incarnation, but action and burned. They kind of play with that in Big Finish and treat them like they're a separate master, because one of the actors, Christopher Beavers, has done a lot of Big Finish, and they've kind of treated him as a separate master. And then at the very end of Tom Baker's time, he becomes a third actor playing the master, Anthony Ainley, who gets the body of Nissa's father and goes gallivanting about the universe as another incarnation with a new body.
Right.
A new body.
So I think we did a Big Finish with Christopher Beavers as the master.
He's really good.
Yeah, it was in Vegas, I think it was, or something like that. But it didn't have the Doctor in it at all.
Yeah, he also, Christopher Beavers is a writer, and he actually wrote an audio play for him as the master, which is an audio play about an audio play. So he's in a recording studio telling you what it's like to be in a recording studio. and it's really clever. It's really nicely done.
Very meta.
We need to do that one at some point.
Yes. Another interesting new thing that was in this episode was a redesign of the TARDIS control room, both the Doctor's TARDIS and the Master's TARDIS, which was obviously the same set, just redressed. And it was supposed to be this new design for next season. This is the end of this particular season, the
season 9,
or the third Doctor's third season. And there was a huge outcry against it or something, like people didn't like it or something along those lines, and they redesigned it again.
Well, there's also problems with the bowls they put up on the wall as they got basically destroyed in storage.
Oh, okay. The new roundels, basically.
Yep.
And folks, if you've got complaints about this, wait till you see what's coming in the 13th Doctor's time.
I know.
Yeah. Now, the console itself is the same console. They just redressed it. They just bolted some stuff onto it to make it look a little more
different.
1970s futuristic instead of 1960s futuristic.
And wait till you see what's coming in the 11th Doctor's time.
Exactly.
We've got ketchup bottles.
Yeah. I'm curious what Russell T Davies is going to do, since he was the originator of that wild, console.
The trash console.
Yes.
By the way, one thing about this that I really liked is, in terms of TARDIS stuff, is this is the first time we have a TARDIS materialize inside a TARDIS. And so we have the Doctor's TARDIS inside the Master's TARDIS, and that's mind-blowing enough. But we also have the Master's TARDIS inside the Doctor's TARDIS.
At the same time.
At the same time. So they're mutually looped, and it's like, okay, it's clear this is the early 70s. We're getting out there.
But yet they can leave it at some point. So, because the only way they go from one to the other is they go out the door. But at some point, they can go out the door and go out into the real world, so they're not stuck inside.
Right.
But yeah, that's what was kind of mind blowing. Little TARDISes all the way down.
I mean, we see that in the 5th Doctor. They have an episode where they do that. A couple of
they do it again.
They do it again. Yeah.
Yep. So it starts with the Doctor having a weird dream about the Master and volcanoes and statues and things, and wakes up, and it's very realistic to him, and he wakes up and demands that Joe, go find out if there have been any significant volcanic eruptions in the world while he was asleep.
Wow, did that feel echoey of the 13th Doctor's finale with the Master doing stuff with volcanoes?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So Joe went onto the computer and looked it up on the internet and saw that on Twitter there was an announcement of, no, I'm just kidding, because back then it would take a while for news to spread. It's kind of funny I was thinking about that.
Assuming they didn't have, a telegraph connection to teletype connection to like press releases. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
They couldn't just go look it up. You have to pull up the paper, and sure enough there was, but they had to have a paper that showed it. But
and then you had the Master. We have him posing as this Professor Thaskalos, which doesn't mean master in Greek.
Well, it means like teacher.
Okay.
And magister in Latin, okay, that also means teacher. So you could kind of make this argument in terms of etymology, but in terms of semantics, in terms of a term that actually means master, like if you're a slave in ancient Greek society, you're not going to call your owner Thaskalos.
Right.
You're going to call him like Kurios or something else.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny that they chose that. I mean, I suppose because as a professor, he's kind of a teacher to, I don't know, but he's at this.
I think they just didn't speak Greek very well.
So intern, go look up the Greek word for master.
Yeah. You just flip open a dictionary and, okay, well, this is one of the meanings. Let's just go with that and not see if there's a better word.
Right. And so he's at this science institute in Cambridge, which is, I don't think at Cambridge, the university, but in Cambridge, the city, the town of, because any major university in Cambridge and Oxford are both major universities will attract sciencey institutes around them. That's a sort of a thing that happens. So he's doing studies about time travel or moving things through time.
Yeah, it's the place he's doing them is called the Newton Institute, which would make sense for Isaac Newton. Yep. And the project is called Tomtit, and a tomtit is a kind of a bird.
Yes.
But it's an acronym in this case for transmission of matter through interstitial time.
Right.
Which is just the gobbledygook they came up with this time to fit the word tomtit.
Yes, that's true. One thing that really strikes me, so that one of the master's assistants is this woman named Ruth, and she's very women's lip. Like this is early 70s, and she's really, but the master and the doctor are both very condescending to the women around them. And it's kind of funny to see through 21st century eyes how it looks. But even what was it? Stuart, the other PhD student, may God bless the good ship Women's Lib and all who sail in her. Yeah, it's like, okay,
it's awkward, but Stuart is her underling, and he kind of pokes fun a little bit at how shrieking feminist he is, but he's going along with it. He's being supportive of her, and he's not. I don't get the vibe that he's condescending to her. I get the vibe that he's just not taking this super seriously, but he's trying to be supportive.
Yeah, he gives her guff, but that's about it. It's not seriously, because of course the master is very much women can't. You go do your thing. Go get me some sandwiches and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, Stewart is pretty laid back. I think is I would describe him. So we find out that the volcano or earthquake or whatever is on Santorini, or also called the Thera Islands, which
I've been there.
Oh, really? It looks beautiful in the pictures. It's one of those places. Well,
I've never gotten off the beach in Santorini. Because I'm not much for, so I should explain. So Catholic Answers has gone on cruises in the Mediterranean before. And for me, the high spots are like Rome and Ephesus and Jerusalem and, Alexandria and places that are mentioned in the Bible. And Santorini is a tourist spot. And so I'm utterly uninterested in it. But I get off the ship. There's a little restaurant on the beach. I go to the restaurant. I order a Diet Coke. I sit there and smoke my pipe, and I'm fine. But it is geologically interesting because there was a bigger island there until, about 3,500 years ago, and it was a volcanic island. The volcano blew and shattered the island. So now it's it's the remnants of what's left over. And so you have these massive cliffs, and the water has filled up part of the caldera, so you can sail the ship into what used to be the caldera of the volcano and unload people.
Cool.
But it has been proposed that Santorini is the basis of the Atlantis legend, because when it blew, it destroyed a good chunk of Minoan civilization. And in the theory, in the 70s, this theory became popular. And they're going with it on this show. And in fact, they call attention to it at one point. I mean, the big objection to how could this be the basis of Atlantis? Because that's beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the gates of Gibraltar. It's supposed to be in the Atlantic Ocean. That's what Plato says. And they bring that up in episode 1. And it's like, oh, that's so 19th century. Everyone who's hip and with it knows that Atlantis was in the Mediterranean now, not in the Atlantic Ocean. But
okay,
that's just the theory, which isn't a particularly good one. But we'll talk about that more on Mysterious World.
I'm looking forward to that one.
We know Atlantis moved to the Pegasus Galaxy, and they had to use a Stargate to get there.
Yeah,
exactly.
We'll talk about that eventually in Secrets of Stargate.
I like it. Let's link all the shows. One thing I noticed about the Third Doctor, it kind of came up for me in this one, because you know how we jump around with all the different doctors, and the Third Doctor, one thing that characterizes him is he's always distracted, not really listening to the people around him who are talking to him, and sort of he does that thing where he says to the person something exactly what they just said to him, but as if he didn't hear them. So I thought that was kind of
ends up where he needed to go anyways.
Right.
I felt sorry for poor Sergeant Benton. He was getting ready to go on 48 hours leave. In other words, he got a weekend off.
Yeah.
And he got it canceled because the doctor was being selfish.
Right.
And the brig just grabs him and cancels his leave.
Oh, to beat the enlisted men. They always, although Benton
gets spit on. I mean, that's how it works.
Benton comes into his own a little bit in this episode, though. I got to give him credit later on. One thing that kind of gets me, there's a moment where there's a window washer peeking in through the window of the master's lab while the experiment is ongoing, and he falls off to the ground, is grievously injured. I mean, they have to call an ambulance, although the jerk bureaucrats with the brigadier don't really care.
No. Brigadier's sure he can deal with it.
And I'm like, oh, this guy must be important to the story. We never see him again.
I'm not even worried about him again.
I didn't understand that just seemed so extraneous. I don't know if you guys had any insight.
He was there to show the time delay, whatever they called it, where time would outside of the room, the time would slow down, or more accurately, inside the room it would speed up. Is really what was happening.
Oh, so when he fell, it was in slow motion.
Yeah.
I think. I just thought that was a dramatic camera effect, like in the 70s, when you'd have a dramatic action, you'd slow things down to show how dramatic they are.
It was supposed to show that time was slowing down outside, or relative to what's going on inside, time was slowing down outside. So.
I see. Yeah, that wasn't well done.
No, it wasn't. And it's the only reason I knew that is just because that's what we see later on.
True.
Units and Brigadier getting trapped by that.
Yeah, it's not well done. The way they portray it, it does make it seem like this guy is going to be important to the plot, and then it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
It's just adding a little bit of drama with someone gets to do a stunt, and it looks visually impressive, and you think, oh, this is going to be important, and then it's not.
So one thing that happens is the master's called away, and he has to go hypnotize the head of the institute, who's about to fire him, but basically, and
and this guy, even the master comments like this guy is the easiest hypnotic subject ever. The master at one point is like, I haven't encountered anyone like you in ages. It's like old times.
And so then the lab assistants, Ruth and Stewart, run the experiment without the master present, which, that would be a big violation in any, regular lab.
And Stewart kind of goads Ruth into it of, oh, do you need a man here to do this? And it's like, okay, let's fire this thing up.
And of course, the things go wrong. We get this explanation that how the interstitial time thing is like time is granular, made up of time atoms. Mm-hmm. And so they're pushing objects through time in between the time atoms. And that's the interstitial part, which is, of course, nonsense. But
Well, there is a theory that time is quantized, but
I knew you'd do that. I would say it's nonsense, and you say, "Oh no, there's some truth to it." But go ahead.
That's what I'm here for, right?
Exactly.
The issue would be how would you get anything between the quantized moments of time, and I guess there are ways that could make sense, but it's certainly far-fetched. I'll give you that much.
Oh, good.
Speaking of Benton coming to his own, he's the one who gets it. He goes, well, it's between now and now.
Mm-hmm.
He's the first one who kind of gets it,
Ben
and the
figures it out.
kind of goes, whatever.
By the way, one of the things that's essential to this experiment is they have this crystal, and it's kind of like if you know the shape in a peace sign. It's got the central shaft and the two things coming off of it. It looks like that.
Yeah,
you got, and only upside down, and it's called the Crystal of Kronos, and it is a crystal, even though the master says it's indistinguishable from other quartz, but this crystal is special, and part of what's special about it is they used this crystal in ancient Atlantis, and it's capable of being put in a kind of timey-wimey resonance between its present form and its ancient Atlantean form. Right. And also, when that happens, you can't move it because it's somehow even though it's physical and you can touch it, they say it's not really there. It's really in ancient Atlantis. So even though you can grab it, your hands can't move it, which is interesting. That is nonsense, but it's interesting nonsense.
Yeah. Yes.
But what they're drawing on here is another part of Atlantis lore, because this idea that Atlantis was powered by crystals is recent. It's something that Edgar Cayce, the early 20th century psychic, came up with, and it may have been he got a lot of his ideas about Atlantis from theosophy. He had run into this guy named Arthur Lammers, who was a big theosophy fan and was having him do readings. And it's really clear that Lammers' theosophical ideas came to influence Edgar Cayce's readings. And so I haven't checked. I know that the theosophy, Madame Blavatsky, the founder of theosophy, had a bunch of theories, including that, which are all nuts, but theories including like there's this root race that was started on Atlantis, and then when Atlantis sank, they colonized other places like Egypt and so forth. And Cayce absorbed a lot of this, so I haven't checked to see if Madame Blavatsky had crystals running Atlantis, but I wouldn't be at all surprised.
You can find out more about Edgar Cayce in Mysterious World episodes 225 and 226.
Yeah,
that was a fascinating story to learn about him. So one of the things that the master does when he's calling Kronos is, come Kronos, come, and we get this, which is in the typical master over the top way.
Hope Kronos speaks English.
Yes. And, we get this explanation that chronovores live outside of time, and the worst one of all is Kronos. He's the time monster of the title. And we're told that the Atlanteans made up legends of the old gods, all the old gods of history, to explain the creatures they encountered. And
right. So in Greek mythology, Kronos isn't a chronovore, he's a Titan.
Yes.
And he, in fact, he's the father of Zeus. And Zeus ends up killing him. But the Titans were like the generation that preceded the gods.
Right. And so what was the master's motivation? To get control of Kronos so that he could control all of time and space?
Yep.
Yes.
Basically, that was the
This is one of these that the entire universe is at stake episodes. That's not just
right.
That's not just a Stephen Moffat thing. That started even back here.
Yeah, though they don't play it out explicitly. They mention that that's his ultimate goal, but they don't show us how Kronos is going to help him control the universe.
Right.
So they don't take us to the brink of he's almost in control.
And he ultimately doesn't really have control of Kronos. He can call Kronos, but he can't really control it.
Right. Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
he can kind of bully him a little bit. But
Yeah.
I have in my notes, as usual, the master is seeking a new source of power.
As usual. Stewart gets the brunt of the first things going wrong with the experiment. He ends up being turned into an old man. So he's 25 years old, we're told, but he looks like an old man.
Almost 26.
Almost 26. And that gets reversed eventually, of course. Benton at the end will be turned into a baby. That gets reversed. And then we get naked Benton at the end. So that's good for Benton, I guess.
Fortunately, briefly.
Very briefly. Speaking of Benton, he also doesn't fall for the master's trick of imitating the Brigadier's voice. Like another moment where Benton comes out ahead.
Yeah, this is a new thing where so in order to get Benton, who's been tasked with guarding the lab, in order to get him out of there, the master calls Benton on the phone and uses the voice of the Brigadier. He just does a perfect imitation. I mean, obviously they had the actor do it, but he does a perfect imitation of the Brigadier and orders Benton out of the lab to go do something else. And while he's and Benton, they don't explain it at first. This is nice. They don't have this told to us in dialogue. Before he leaves, Benton opens a window in the lab, which is on the second floor of this building at the Newton Institute. And then he starts to leave, and he walks across the lawn and goes around the side of the building to do what the Brigadier told him. And then we see the master and the hypnotized leader of the Newton Institute come across the lawn the other way to go into the lab. And Benton is just hiding around the side of the building and sees them. And so as they're going up the stairs to the second floor lab, Benton goes up the fire escape to the open window he left open so he can get back in and surprise them. And it's all visual. It's a little bit like watching a Mission Impossible episode. If you watch old Mission Impossible episodes, they don't tell you the whole plan in detail. You have to watch and figure it out.
That's true. Yeah. Of course,
and the actor did a really good job of kind of see on his face where he goes, "I don't think something's right here." You know, as he hangs up the phone, he kind of looks and then opens the window, and like you said, then he just walks out and he's, "Oh yeah, he's following orders," and then immediately sneaks back around and goes back in.
The master does get him with the oldest trick in the book, like, who's that coming in the door, and knocks him out.
Yeah.
we have a running gag for a little bit about what's the oldest trick in the book, with people identifying. I think there are like 3 instances where they identify that's the oldest trick in the book.
And in fact, then there's a moment where Ruth is like, the doctor's right behind you. He's like, I'm not falling for that. And it was the doctor right behind him after all, which was good. So the master tries to grab Kronos from Atlantis, but instead grabs the high priest from the Temple of Poseidon, who he then pulls under his influence, but not hypnotized. I think he just kind of bullies him into it as a, time leader.
He also convinces him that he's he's incredibly powerful in league with the gods, and so the guy's, okay, if you've got godlike power, I guess I'm obeying you.
Right. And then together they finally get Kronos, who turns out to be a big flappy bird.
Oh, man. Oh, it's so fun how horrible the Kronos costume is.
Yes.
It looks like someone took white poster board and rolled it up into tubes and made a human bird outfit and put it on an actor and then shone a bright light on it so that it overtaxes the whatever of the cameras and looks glowy. Okay, it's a guy in a really cheap bird suit
on a harness flying through the air. Who then immediately eats the hypnotized director of the institute. I guess he's done, that actor.
And it's so impractical that all Kronos can do is like flap around. He can't and menace people, but how does he actually eat anybody? Right. I mean, his mouth won't do that. What is he doing? All you can really do is showing him flapping in front of someone, and then that person is gone or something.
Right. And like, how is he controlling time and space? Whatever. You just have to accept it. Now, with all of this, the Doctor's plan is to bring the TARDIS to the Newton Institute. It still doesn't have a dematerialization circuit that works. So he's not flying around on his own, but he's got this plan to sort of, rubber band virtual time rubber band it in a sense to the Master's TARDIS so that he can follow him wherever the Master goes. The Master's TARDIS goes somewhere, the Doctor's TARDIS can go with it, especially since he does that timey-wimey thing where they occupy the same space.
Yeah, there's another thing though that the Doctor does first.
Right.
He builds a ridiculous machine out of junk. It's like he takes a wine bottle and a cork and sticks some forks in the cork on the top of the wine bottle, and he puts a cup of tea on top of it, or an empty cup of tea, because the tannin from the tea leaves is important to this device. And he starts spinning the cork with the forks, and this somehow temporarily interferes with the Master's use of his Crystal of Kronos time device. So there's no tech here. This is just a wine bottle, a cork, a couple of forks, and an empty cup of tea. And yet it has this amazing effect of temporarily stopping the Master. And the Doctor explains that back in school on Gallifrey, they would make these things to mess up each other's time experiments, and he calls it a time flow analog. But wow, it's ridiculous. But I love it. I love it.
It's a flashy light thing. That must be the tech. I don't know.
Yeah. So and he does a bunch of things where he messes with the Master's crystal as a delaying tactic until the TARDIS can get there. That's the one of the big things.
They're bringing it on a lorry.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Captain Yates is.
Yep. Yes. And so the Master responds by bringing people through time and things through time to attack the unit troops carrying the TARDIS. The first is a knight in armor. Then
on a horse with a lance.
Right. Then there are the Roundheads, which this was something. They were an army from the English Civil War. They attacked them with cannons and muskets.
I gather they're regarded as a bunch of jerks these days.
Yeah, I think they were on the bad side. They were supporters of Parliament against the king. So that would, since they lost, sort of. That's a whole long story, and I'm not going to get into it. There's actually a really excellent podcast called Revolutions where he goes through this history of the English Civil War, which is really good. It's a really well done podcast. Anyway. And then the last bit is he brings a V1 buzz bomb. That is a World War II bomb that the Nazis used to, early unguided missiles, in a sense, that they used to shoot at
now,
England.
You'll notice the Master's bringing people from progressively more recent periods of history to fight the unit soldiers. And if you've gotten up to World War I, there's not a lot left in terms of history. I mean, he started with something from the Middle Ages, which was centuries ago. Right. So there's not a lot left. The fun thing to do would be to bring Captain Yates and his same guys from last week and make them fight each other.
Yeah.
That would have been confusing to Captain Yates, for sure.
If I shoot at myself, do I cease to exist?
So, these are things that were in that location at the time that they existed, because the farmer was like, wow, that V1 landed exactly where another one landed during World War II. I also think it's interesting that the people, like the Brigadier, is old enough that he would remember what the buzz bombs sounded like. So it had a very distinctive sound, like it's a motorcycle or something along those lines.
That's why they're called buzz bombs.
Exactly. And just before they would fall, the engine would turn off, and so when the buzz bomb goes silent, that's when get under cover. Exactly. And so it's kind of interesting to see people who had lived through this era, recognizing
this would have been 30 years after the war, so absolutely it would have been living memory.
Yeah, exactly. So so that was interesting, and that was a cliffhanger for one of the episodes where the bomb lands near Yates's truck, and Yates gets injured. So you know, he doesn't play a huge role in this episode, not even as much as Benton. Well,
and the show's eventually going to choose Benton over Yates anyway.
Right. So the Master's TARDIS, which has a working camouflage circuit, is looks like an old computer, reel-to-reel computer there.
Data storage, tape data storage.
Thank you. And when Crassus, who is the Atlantean priest, we get him going inside a TARDIS, and it's bigger on the inside. So we have another one of those moments. But it's interesting how the Master responds differently than the Doctor. He just arrogance and superiority, like just straight up, which is kind of an interesting contrast. The Doctor can be arrogant, but
I like the way the Atlantean priest puts it. He says, "So vast a space and so small a box," instead of it's bigger on the inside.
Yeah, right. One of the things around this point, because Joe keeps following on with the Doctor despite the danger, and I just think one of the things that characterizes Jo Grant is she's unrelentingly positive and optimistic, even in the face of certain death, and that's one of the things I like about Jo. She's just, it's not that she's like perky or clueless. She's just optimistic. She's positive. That's one of the things that's nice.
More so than Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane could get bent out of shape and fretty.
Oh, yeah.
Over things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, Jo's really
Sarah Jane can whine.
Oh, yeah.
About stuff, but Jo Grant does not whine about stuff.
Right.
Sarah Jane's favorite phrase was, "I don't think I can handle much more of this. I don't think I can take much more than this." She says that so many times, but she also was willing to let the Doctor have it too when that happened. So.
Right. Sarah Jane stood up to the Doctor much more than Jo stands up to the Doctor in this case. Yep.
But she does so through whining.
She does. The other thing is I noticed is the Third Doctor talks a lot about Venusians. Like everything is a Venusian this or that. But that's a Third Doctor thing. Not really any other Doctors. I mean, it comes up a little bit like Venusian Aikido, I think, with the Fourth Doctor, doesn't it?
And the 12th.
Yeah.
Right. He's mentioned it. But the Third Doctor.
Callback. Yeah. The Third Doctor is Mr. Venus.
He is.
He even sings like Venus songs and stuff like that. Songs, stuff like that. So, yeah.
So at one point, Kronos consumes the Doctor, like he did with the Institute Director, and sends him into the time vortex. He's not dead. And then we have this scene of the Doctor communicating telepathically with Jo, who's still inside the TARDIS.
And they tell us it's the telepathic circuits of the TARDIS, and that, like, at one point, the Master, to set this up, the Doctor and the Master are in their TARDISes, which are inside of each other, and they're talking over the view screen, and the Master gets tired of listening to the Doctor, so he turns the sound off. And so when the Doctor realizes the Master has turned the sound off, he does something. It's very vague what it is, but he does something that overrides that so that the Master can't turn him off, at which point the Doctor or the Master does something back, which causes the Doctor to speak backwards. Yep. And Jo says, "What language was that?" And the Doctor says, "English," but the Master has reversed it through the telepathic circuits. So, like, the Doctor was talking, but the telepathic circuits of the TARDIS made him speak English backwards. Right. And this is, as far as I can recall, the first mention of the telepathic circuits. They were starting in John Pertwee's era to not fully explain things, but raise questions that the fans had. Like at one point, and people wondered, how is it that they speak the English on all these other planets? Right. And at one point, the Third Doctor explains to his assistant, because they put that question in the mouth of an assistant, and the Third Doctor explains, well, it's because of a Time Lord gift, and then they don't explain beyond that. But here we have the mention of the telepathic circuits, and eventually they're going to say it's through the telepathic circuits that this gift works. So that's how you can understand it. It's really the TARDIS translating. And of course, the telepathic circuits take on a much bigger role in New Who.
there was apparently a deleted scene, in fact, in this story that would have explained, the Doctor explaining to Joe that a device in the TARDIS, he was going to turn it on so she could communicate with the Atlanteans. So that would have happened, and they ended up dropping it. But it's interesting they were trying to do more of that. So Joe is hearing the Doctor telepathically, including all of these whispers, which he says are all of his other
his subconscious thoughts. And I wouldn't listen to those too closely, if you would. I'm not happy with all of those.
Which is an interesting admission. That's something true of all of us, right? The TARDIS wiki says that there's a female voice in there, which they interpret as the first hint that Time Lords can change gender between regenerations. So I thought that was, I don't know, that might be a little bit of a stretch there.
I frankly didn't slow it down and closely listen to all the whispers. I was interested in getting on with the plot.
Yes. Joe gets him back rather handily with the very helpful little extreme emergency lever, which is apparently on the TARDIS console. Whenever you're in an extreme emergency, pull the lever and it will fix it.
Pretty much.
And so at this point, everything has shifted from hanging out in Cambridge, in the Newton Institute, basically, to Atlantis, the whole six episode story. So the rest of it will be in Atlantis.
Yeah, we get to see progressively more of Atlantis as we go along. At first, Atlantis looks like a dark set with a couple of pillars and a brazier. And progressively we start to see more of it until we get to see it full in the daylight. And wow, they spent some time preparing these sets. This is pretty impressive for 1970s television, children's television.
Yep. And once there, the Master is spending his time trying to convince the Atlanteans to reveal the secrets of the crystal, which the crystal he has, like you mentioned, is only a small portion of the big crystal that he needs, which is stored in the undercroft of the Temple of Poseidon, apparently, guarded by the Minotaur, which is played by David Prowse, who will in the future be Darth Vader. He'll be the guy in the suit of Darth Vader.
I missed that.
I find your lack of Greek faith disturbing.
So I thought
he has about as many lines that made it to film as he did as Darth Vader.
Yes,
he sits there and roars.
There's a lot of roaring there. And as you mentioned, the King Dalios resists this call to bring Kronos back because he remembers the curses that came with the blessings of Kronos. And the Master is unable, as Ezios was to hypnotize the Institute director, he's unable to hypnotize Dalios.
Yes, this is great. I love this. He's like, you will obey me. And Dalios laughs in his face and says, a very elementary technique of fascination. And I'm going, hey, nice, because the fascinatio was the original word that was used for enchanting someone.
Right.
And it's where we get fascination. That person's fascinated. They're enchanted with this thing that they're fascinated by. And so even though we use it today to just mean interested, fascinating. It's originally it was used as a magic term. And it's nice that they call that back. I also love when Dalios meets the Doctor and Joe. The Doctor's introducing, Dalios says, like, who's your assistant? And the Doctor says, oh, this is Joe Grant. And after that, she is the Lady Jojo.
The Lady Jojo Grant. I think that happens with James Bond at some point. He's like, I'm Bond, James Bond. And someone calls him Bond, James Bond, like for the rest of the movie.
I love mistakes like that. In the album, I Think We're All Bozos on This Bus by the Firesign Theater, you have this character named Clem who's going to a futuristic amusement park. And the first thing the amusement park does when you get there is asks your name. And he says, Clem. And thereafter, will Mr. A. Clem please report to the hospitality shelter?
So we have lots of court intrigue for Atlantis. We have this cast of characters. Dalius the King, we have Queen Galilea, Lord Hippias, who's apparently champion of the court, and we have the Queen's maid servant. So we have this intrigue, and Hippias likes Galilea.
Well, there's something going on between Hippias and Galilea. It's like they're former lovers or wannabe lovers or something. But now Galilea has turned on Hippias because I mean, she's got this 500-year-old husband.
Right.
So, she's a little, I guess, bored with that. But she has a total crush on the master immediately. Yes. He has the bearing of a god.
Yep. Yes.
I guess she likes colossal jerks.
She's like, or power, because it looks like he's got a lot of power. And and she kind of she doesn't want to depose Dalios, but she wants to install the master as sort of
the power behind the throne.
A little bit of what was the Russian? Rasputin. He's got a little Rasputin thing going on.
Which the idea later on to become Rasputin.
Yeah. So I thought I was trying to I kind of ruined it by not remembering Rasputin, but I kind of like it was kind of a Rasputin thing going on. And meanwhile, Joe, who ends up being seen as a lady, gets dressed up in a Atlantean outfit. She ends up in the labyrinth with Hippias.
And, by the way, Atlantean fashions are better than the 1970s nightmare that Joe normally wears.
With
the kind of furry, fleecy thing.
Yes.
Like, go with the Atlantean look. It's much better for you.
Yes. Galilea and Joe looked very nice in Atlantis. And so Hippias has been sent to battle the Minotaur. Well, he's been sent to the crystals, but ends up dying at the hands of the Minotaur. He's dispatched pretty quickly, in fact. Yeah. And the Doctor ends up playing bullfighter with the Minotaur with his cape, which I thought was a lot of fun. And defeats the Minotaur. But Joe and the Doctor are captured and end up in a jail cell. And the Doctor starts telling the story to Joe of the worst day of his life. Mm-hmm. An old man
so
who listened
far.
So far. An old man who listened to the Doctor's troubles, and in the on Gallifrey, a monk, right? He called him a monk. And in the end, the old man points to a flower to give the Doctor a new perspective on life. Like, these sound like terrible troubles. Look at that flower. And it was supposed to be this like sort of idea of even with all your troubles in life, there are still flowers that bloom and that sort of thing. So it was an interesting interlude.
I can think of Monty Python. Always look on the bright side of life.
Yep, that's right. But it's fascinating.
And we will meet that monk later in John Pertwee's time. He's in the final John Pertwee adventure.
Oh, right.
He's Campo.
Oh, that's Campo. Okay, so we've done that the Planet of the Spiders, which was the regeneration episode for the Third Doctor, and that's the monk. Okay. Interesting to get the backstory at this point. Mm-hmm. In the end, the Master's going to bring Kronos, and the Doctor and Joe are they're in this council area, and they've killed Dalios. By the way, Dalios dies in Joe's lap when he was thrown into this prison cell,
which drives a wedge between Galilea and the Master because she wanted her 500-year-old husband alive.
Yes, she just wanted the Master's power. And the Master ends up unleashing Kronos on Atlantis to destroy it, and then runs away with Joe on his back into his TARDIS, and then the Doctor follows.
Yeah, Sycorax Rock has a great line about that in their Third Doctor song. It's Atlantis is sunk once more. It's all thanks to a chronovore.
And then the Doctor threatens to time ram the Master's TARDIS, which is this technique which would basically destroy them all. Like we'll time ram, we'll destroy us both before you can unleash the Kronos. And then the Doctor hesitates, and Joe does it. She throws the switch. She's got the nerve to throw it when the Doctor won't. And I thought that was interesting. but they don't
the master knew the doctor wasn't actually going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, he kept calling his bluff, and of course the doctor, I'm going to do it. I'm really going to do it this time. I mean it. I'm going to do it. And Joe just jumps over and hits the switch to.
Yeah. And they're not destroyed, obviously, but they end up outside of time in this beyond reality where Kronos lives, who turns out in this point to be this giant head woman, which kind of looked like Galea.
Yeah, it looked like Galea to me. I mean, she's got similar, I mean, you know, they have that kind of pancake makeup from the period that they would put on women's faces, and she's kind of got that, and it looks kind of Atlantean, and you've got the two TARDISes and the Doctor and the Master and Joe in the foreground blocking parts of her face.
Yeah.
I thought it was Galea, but I guess I'm mistaken.
You look at the credits and they are different.
It made no sense to me.
Right.
I mean, why would Galea have been doing all those machinations if she is Kronos? So yeah, that didn't make sense, but, okay, I guess she's not a big man in a bird costume. She's really a woman now, I guess.
And they do that, you know, she really doesn't have a human form or, you know, a physical form and can take any appearance she wants. So
the irony is that both actresses are named Ingrid.
Yeah.
Different last names, but that is kind of ironic. And she says she's beyond, or it says it beyond good and evil. We're neither. So, you know, the reputation.
I've heard that before. That means you're evil.
Exactly. So the Master starts begging for his life. The Doctor is going to, Kronos is going to condemn the Master to an eternity of punishment.
Yeah, because he had this amulet from the Atlantean priest of Poseidon. So it's like, it seems the Atlantean priests, even though their job is to worship Poseidon, you know, for the benefit of Atlantis, they're secretly worshiping Kronos. Right. And the high priest has a medallion that he doesn't understand the function of. He knows the ancients could control Kronos, but he doesn't know how. And the Master realizes because of that medallion you've got. So the Master has been using the medallion to bully Kronos into doing what he wants. Right.
And so the Master's about to get an eternity of hell, essentially. And the Doctor pleads on his behalf. He pleads for his leniency. And of course, the Master, at the first opportunity, bolts back into the TARDIS and runs away. And the Doctor's like, hey, to Kronos, don't let him get away. And she said, well, you asked for leniency. That's on you.
Yep. Let us handle it. You wanted to handle it your way. Well, your way meant he escaped. Oh, well.
Right. And the Doctor asked Joe, because she kind of objects, like, how could you plead for the Master? And the Doctor asked Joe, would you condemn anyone to an eternity of torment, even the Master? Which is an interesting question. That's an interesting moral question for any of us. That's really only for God, to condemn.
Yeah, so answer no, I would not.
Exactly. God might, but and would, but not. But we shouldn't.
Well,
wouldn't.
It's more self-imposed. Right.
To be a little more accurate there. So baby Benton is, as we mentioned, is still hanging out, and they're trying to figure out a way to feed the poor little tyke who's hungry. And but Ruth and Stu manage to re-age Benton from a baby, and like we said, we get the comic ending of naked Benton standing behind the console, wondering what the heck is going on. So, any final thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
One thing that was just kind of a quick line is the events in Cambridge happened on the feast of Michaelmas. It was Yates that wished, Captain Yates wished Merry Michaelmas, and that's, of course, the feast of St. Michael the Archangel, the traditional feast of St. Michael the Archangel, which is September 29th.
Right. That's right. How about you, Jimmy? Any final thoughts?
I thought it was a good story. It's a little long at 6 parts, but they effectively, because the first half of it is effectively set in the 20th century, and the second half is essentially set in Atlantis. It doesn't drag as much as most 6-parters. And it's really nice to see Atlantis and in the Doctor Who universe and be there for the destruction, although they didn't have the special effects to, fully realize it.
Right.
it was pretty action packed. I got to say, there was plenty going on. I like the speaking of explaining things, the Bessie at high speed, and that's always fun. It's always fun to see Bessie flying around.
And they ask another question in this on behalf of the viewers. Joe says when the doctor, stops Bessie cold, which they do by returning the film to normal speed. Joe says, "Why didn't I go through the windshield?" And the doctor explains that Bessie's braking system absorbs inertia.
Right. Speaking of changing the film speed, we had those scenes of the Brigadier and the others in the time mud, whatever you would call it, which doesn't affect the doctor, so we can pull them out of it. But it's always fun to see like actors having to move real slowly to pretend that their time is slowed down.
Well, you can tell they did slow down the film even still. You can still see that jittery, how it doesn't move as smoothly as it would at normal speed.
Right.
It's also nice to see the doctor, he runs into the slow down time field and grabs the person and turns them around and brings them back. And they're moving slowly until they get out of the time field. And then you see this look of, he does this both with Dr. Ruth and with the Brigadier. And as they come back to where time is flowing at normal speed, you see this look of confusion cross both their faces. It's like they didn't realize they'd been grabbed and turned around, which I'm not sure how realistic that is, but it's interesting.
So, all right, good. So that does it for The Time Monster. That's a fun story. I enjoyed it too. And I think it was long, but having it broken into two parts really helped. Great. So let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Michael F., Justin D., Michael P., Ted H., and Nicholas W. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And would also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of this Third Doctor story, The Time Monster. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. As I mentioned before, we're now have full video of our recording on YouTube at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Fourth Doctor story, The Deadly Assassin. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
And we're about to meet our first burned master.
Very good. And Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom. And I guess a deadly assassin might be worse than just a wounding assassin. I don't know.
The incompetent assassin.
Yeah, I was gonna. The deadly ones are the competent ones. Yes.
Right. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, if wisdom is to seek the truth, I am a philosopher.